Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unicorn Trajectory podcast. Our guest today is Aun Azmi from Indonesia. He was an ex-market expansion lead at Gojek, one of the biggest super apps in Asia, which was IPO at more than $30 billion. The service offerings are mainly ride-hailing, food delivery, fintech, among other services. Aun and I worked closely during our previous roles in Gojek for the launch of the delivery service in Vietnam, the first international market of Gojek outside Indonesia. Since then, he has ventured into FMCG industry doing strategy and operation roles, and now he's cooking a few other exciting plans after his MBA in Cambridge University. Aun, welcome to the show.
Hey, Skye. Good to be here.
And just a bit disclaimer, everyone. So all of the opinions are our own, sharing our experience, and we don't represent Gojek or GoTo Group.
Yes, that's right.
I'm so happy to have you on the show today because it's like it's an ex-colleagues kind of thing, so we can just dive into it. I'm really happy to talk to someone like I know so well.
Yeah, same here. We haven't met in a while, so I think this is also kind of a good way to reconnect after quite some times. So yeah, very exciting to be in this podcast.
Can you give the audience a bit of context at Gojek in 2018 when we start the international expansion? It was a huge, like $500 million expansion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think at that time, 2018 was the peak of sort of the platform business industry, and Gojek is one of the sort of local heroes in that regards. So Gojek has been in Indonesia for quite some time, and then they're thinking of like expanding into other markets. Their closest competitor at that time, which is Grab, also they've expanded first from their home market, which is Malaysia, Singapore, and then they've already expanded to other market in the region. So it's only natural for Gojek to do the same. And I think the reason why Vietnam was chosen first is because I think one, Vietnam is a big market and has a lot of similarities to Indonesia in terms of the consumer behavior, the market behavior. So it's only logical that Gojek chose Vietnam as their first market for international expansion.
Just to give the audience some context of the scale of Gojek and Indonesia in Vietnam, yeah, it's actually Gojek. It's definitely one of the biggest consumer tech companies in the world. And Indonesia, it's a market with more than 300 million people, and Vietnam has more than 100 million people. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
sometimes I need to explain the scale of things to people. Like these
yeah,
things are huge.
yeah. You're right. And it's I think both Indonesia and Vietnam has been in the economic growth trajectory even like 10 years ago. So like I think it's like economically also the scale has been keep growing. Indonesia is already top 20 biggest market in the world, and Vietnam is not far behind.
Yeah, definitely. So aside from Vietnam, the expansion also included Singapore and Thailand. So what factor did you use to prioritize when you evaluate, like why Vietnam, Thailand, and Singapore among like 10 Southeast Asia countries?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go deeper into Vietnam and Thailand first, because Singapore is a different story. It's more of a strategic view. But like for Vietnam, Thailand, and at that time, Philippines was in the pipeline as well. So essentially, we want to expand to a growing market
Hmm.
first. And then also we want to grow to the market where we know we have the rights to win. Like we know that our product works. And that's why I think Vietnam, Thailand was chosen first. That was the first two market that we chose because of that reason.
So let's talk about Singapore a bit. It's very interesting because today is 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So nearly 5-6 years after the expansions, and Gojek just announced last week that they pulling out of Vietnam after pulling out of Thailand and didn't really launch in Philippines. So there's all of the expansion markets, only Singapore is still standing.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion about that?
I think more than anything, I think it's a business decision, right? I think where uh Goto nowadays has a different focus in mind. Um I'm not sure why they still keep Singapore, but like in my opinion, I think it comes to Singapore being kind of a hub for Asia Pacific, and keeping Singapore makes sense in the sense of like they want to be sort of connected to the rest of the world. As well as from the sort of profitability point of view. As you know, um, Singapore is kind of a high margin market. So I think I think coming back into the business decision side, I think in my opinion, they keep Singapore because Singapore is still, I would say, profitable compared to the other market. And I think yeah, I think the decision, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a wrong decision. I think it makes sense, and I understand that they do that, and I hope that they can come back to international market in the future. But at this point of time, I think it is the right decision.
Yeah, I would add my point of view. So we need to rewind a bit. So in 2018, Gojek was a pre-IPO companies, right? So when
Yeah.
you expand to 3, 4, 5 different markets, it just give you like a better positions to IPO. And the second thing is it's also competitions, right? Because let's say back in the days, Grab, Gojek, and Uber was basically fighting for Southeast Asia, which is even until today is a huge like emerging regions. So it makes total sense for me that was like the pre IPO strategy. But from a really profitability strategic point of view, when I look at expanding business from just business point of view, because not all the companies, they have like a $500 million budget. Let's say if I have a $10 million budget and I'm based in Vietnam or Indonesia, I would pick Singapore, right? Because the profitability, let's say it's the same in the Middle East. When I think about expansion, and if I just have like a $10 million, I would look at Dubai and Saudi Arabia first before I look at Egypt, unless I'm like a huge, massive, like multi-billion dollars company, and then I'll start looking into Egypt or let's say Africa. Is more capital efficient to launch in countries like Singapore and Dubai and Saudi Arabia. Just have the high spending power. Yeah.
I agree on that.
So we work together on launching the GoFood delivery service, and we pride ourselves for having the most merchants on the platform. And actually, one of our
first time.
for the first time, I was like, let's bring all the restaurants in Vietnam onto the platform, and that was like the competitive advantage, because we have like so many street food merchants in Vietnam, and that's our culture. Yeah, so it's very hard for a platform to compete if you don't really bring all the mom and pops onto the platform. So I remember one of our discussions, our earliest discussion was how to onboard like 35,000 merchants in 3 months. So let's dissect this together because we did our calculation, but if we were to go and meet them like door to door, it will take like years. So we really need to come up with something like creative in terms of execution. So what was your experience on that?
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting experience. But okay, so let's lay down all the playing field. So in the merchant worlds, I would say it's there's a lot of variations in there. There's a small one, there's a big one, and all that. So essentially, what we did at that time was at first we actually divided into two separate sort of segments, right? So we have the what we call the strategic merchants, which is like the one that already has a power in the market, usually the big chain or the one that has a lot of branches, a lot of transaction. So those strategic merchants, we still need to treat them a little bit different, right? So we still need to go to door. We want to negotiate terms with them in order for us to access their vast potential. Then there's another type of merchant, which is like the small medium one. And as you say, it's actually, I would say it's one of the competitive advantage that we need to bring into the platform. And that's how actually also GoFood Indonesia was growing, right? So in this, and keep in mind, this was happening in 2018. The law on like data privacy and all that, it's
Yeah.
totally different than today. So at that time, like there wasn't really established sort of data privacy law in Vietnam. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like there was no. I would say we have more sort of freedom to explore things, and so we see a potential to leverage technology in order to gain that sort of vast amount of data in a shorter amount of time. So we did that, but no, I think like nowadays I think the playing field is different, and I think it will not be as easy as what we did back then. So but so you have to go to like a third party right now in order to access this kind of data. But yeah, I think I would say we were quite locked out at that time. We could leverage a lot of the technology to kind of get the data fast.
I would debate about the luck part. I think
Mm-hmm.
in a mission like this, whenever you go to a country, you need to find a creative way to map out the market and expand really fast. Given that you don't have a problem on the capital side, this is like not a situation where we need to worry about money, right? So let's say we need to segment the merchant. So let's say the 10%, the group, let's say the McDonald's, KFC, those kind of merchants, and then we'll build a very sophisticated sales team, and eventually bring someone sophisticated like in Uber to deal with them, right? To bring them on board.
Mm-hmm.
But on the mass merchant side, which is like 90% of the market, which I came up with is I came to the tech team and tell them to build me a tool to scrape the entire Google to find the name and the address of the merchants, and then I send them physical letters to invite them onto the platform. So this is like a creative strategy, and even nowadays I feel like with all the data privacy, we can still scrape like whatever public informations on the internet. So I wouldn't think that would not be applicable today, but what I like between us, like the dynamics of working together, is we can sit down and figure out a plan to execute like very quickly and still get to that 35,000 merchants in 3 months and not, let's say, 3 years.
Yeah, and I think that level of sort of creativity is what people needed, like especially if you want to kind of start a new business in a platform, especially, right? Because like that the scale of information that you can onboard in your platform is what makes your platform strong. And I think what I like about like our working relationships also, like we have that level of openness to kind of bounce ideas back and forward, and then like try to, we know that our mission is clear, so we are working together to try to achieve that mission. And I think our sort of laser focus is also kind of help us to go into that sort of target.
Yeah, and even in the situation that we had a lot of capital to deploy, let's just say that there was close to no limit, right? Let's just get this done. Let's just get this mission done. But I remember the team from both Indonesia in all the markets were very lean. We didn't build like hundreds of people team to execute things. This is why we execute like so fast. To put things into perspective, we launched like a ride-hailing food delivery platform and capture like 40% of like market share in Vietnam in about 6 months, which is amazing. But I credit a lot of that to a lean structure of the team. So, and that can be very applicable for people who don't have access to a lot of capital. Let's say they have access to like 10 millions, and then now they need to think about how to structure like an international expansion team from HQ and local perspective. Can you just give people like a very lean structure like for that?
You mean like the organization structure in where
Yeah.
we had? Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's the team is definitely lean because like I think it comes, so I have to go back first into the operating models that we did back then, right? So like it was because of the close similarity of the between the two markets, we wanted to do like a more of a plug and play model into when we do the market expansion. So that's why the lean organization at that time, the thinking was like we can do this um easy with like, let's say, less sort of resources, so we don't put a lot of resources in terms of like the people, right? So, and at that time, I mean, as you mentioned, it's not about like it's not about we don't have fundings to do that. It's more of decision where we know that we don't need to spend a lot of effort and resources on that, except from the operations part, when we try where we need to onboard merchants. At that time we have two options. We either expand into the contracted workers because we just want to use them in a short period of time, or we use technology, and at that time we use technology. So I think the lean organization gives us sort of more I would say seamless in terms of the effort to uh coordinations, as well as the coordinations. Actually, that's the big thing.
Let me expanding that a bit from let's say the local team point of view, right? So let's say in HQ there was a task force. There was a task force on international expansions, includes like people like yourself, which has a management consulting background, and a lot of the job is to package the model and then do knowledge transfer, and then empower the local leadership to navigate their own battles.
Yeah.
And you help. It's like you like
help
like
along
a
the way.
university.
Yeah, like a subject expert. Yeah.
Which I think it's a very nice vibe. Because let's say Vietnam and Thailand and Singapore, three completely different countries. So let's say if you come with a mentality of this is our business model, we're gonna micromanage you, and this is the P&L that you need to produce after 6 months. I doubt that it's gonna work because they are different countries.
Yeah, and it's also kind of I would say at that time the thinking was also about like mitigating risk as well, right? So I think with this is the first effort of of a company. I would say it's a new company. Gojek, it's at that time was like what 6 years old. So this is their
New
first
and
foray.
huge, new and huge.
Yeah.
It was worth like
So
$8 billion.
yeah, exactly. So it's like it's also like when we try something, we have to think about the risk as well, right? So like this is kind of also a way for the HQ for Gojek to kind of mitigate the risk as well. And I think as you say, the model works out very well for Vietnam. However, I think when we expand it into Thailand, things are as you mentioned, it's a little bit different from Vietnam. So we had to adjust quite a bit of time for Thailand, because like the plug and play model didn't really work that well in Thailand, because the market, as when we were there, we found out that actually the market structure is different. You mentioned about the mass market, the street food. It doesn't work that well in Thailand. They don't order something from the street food stalls through the platform. So that was one of the things that we found out when we launched Thailand. So in Thailand, we actually put more sort of control from the headquarters to the market, because we want to make sure that the the expansion is successful there, and we need to have more sort of customization in the products, as well as the business model.
Which leads to my next questions.
Mhm.
So one of the most important aspects of global expansion, in my opinion, is actually localizations.
Hmm.
So what was your experience in
Yeah,
localizing a platform to many
yeah,
countries? Can we put it in like can there be like a process of
yeah.
localizing?
So, okay, first of all, I agree. I think localization is one of the most, if not the most important aspect of an expansion. But I think the devil is in the detail, right? So like we need to define first, like what does this mean? Like what are the things that needs to be localized? And I think coming back to that clarity on the operating model, I think when we first launched in Vietnam, we kind of know that actually the plug and play model works in Vietnam. So, and then since we also want to launch as fast as possible, so we keep the level of localization kind of low to medium level. So we did like language localization for sure. But then other than that, we didn't really do much in terms of the products itself, the technology itself, right? So, but it's a different story in another market. I mentioned about
Let
Thailand
me
where we
just
had.
give the audience a bit of context. So the
Yep.
context here is that we're launching a food delivery app, and the food delivery app of the product of Gojek, it's sophisticated. So it allows a lot of customizations on your order, and it can fit a wide range of merchants
Yeah.
from the big brands like McDonald's or fine dining all the way to the smaller merchants. And you can add like whatever way of toppings or how you want to customize
Yeah.
your orders, right? So the
Yes.
product itself, it's like it's like 150% compared to all other food delivery products. And so a lot of the
Yeah.
localization is actually how to take that and tailor that to the types of merchants that we found in a country, right?
Correct. So yeah, I mean that was kind of the one, probably the biggest requirement before we even considering expansion, right? So I think we need to make sure that the product actually works well first. So once we make sure of that, then we'll think about the expansion. Um, but yeah, I think, I mean, when we launched Thailand, I think in terms of product, we don't do a lot of customization actually. It's just probably the language. That's as far as I remember. I don't think we do a lot of differently. I think what we do differently in Thailand is more of operating model, I would say. Where like for example, we don't do a lot of we don't actually onboard a lot of the mass market, the small and medium sort of merchants. Uh we put more focus on like those sort of strategic merchants. And um we did more of sort of partnership with them as well, and we also did a lot of partnership with like the non-food and beverage brand as well, just to at that time it was when we launched Thailand, there was already a lot of talk about like making a platform, the Gojek platform, as an advertising tool as well. So we did a lot of those sort of customization in that regards.
Yeah, and Thailand in itself, it's a complicated market because I've launched a few things there, and the consumer behavior is completely different compared to a traditional like emerging markets, and also a traditional like developed market. It's a bit of both.
Yeah, it's I
So
would
it's
say yeah, I would say it's even leaning towards a more sophisticated,
mm,
modern, like closer to Singapore, almost, right? So, um, yeah, so it's something which in a way it's like if you can crack Thailand, the opportunity is huge, but it's definitely not the same market as I would say Indonesia, Vietnam, or Philippines. At least from a food delivery perspective.
yeah, I take it from like a strategic point of view. So let's say I say it's a complicated market from a business decision perspective, right? Because let's say if you don't generate like profitability like Singapore, but the cost of doing business is as high as Singapore, and the cost of figuring things out as high as Singapore, and then probably this is like something 5 years down the line and not like right away, right? So even nowadays, I apply the same thinking when, let's say, I expand companies from Dubai to other markets in the Middle East, right? Because the Middle East is like 22 countries. Yeah, they have they are different countries, and with the same amount of money, with the same amount of efforts, you need to go somewhere that generate the highest return in the shortest period of time to stabilize the expansions. And then after that, we'll look into more sort of like blitz scaling.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
No, I think back in the day, this was like a blitz scaling missions, but the environment, the business environment in 2024, it has become a lot more strategic in
Yeah,
every regions.
I
Do you
agree.
have like the same like observations?
No, yeah, I agree. I think it's especially when you talk about like a platform business, uh it's it's been like nowadays I think it's been one is kind of a more already matured business, like because a lot of things are already platformized. Um Another thing is about the regulatory environment. I think a lot of countries already uh found a ways to regulate the platform business. Whether you call it a gig economy or something else, I think a lot of these governments have figured out how to regulate it, and it makes it more restrictive to expand in a scale that we had before, right? But I think if your listeners want still thinking of like doing a platform business, I think the key word here is, I would say, searching costs. You need to find a a business or a niche where the cost of doing searching or searching information or searching your vendor or whatever is still high, that's that's where you should focus on and find a way to platformize the industry, right?
You mean to acquire the users?
It doesn't have to be acquiring users, but so like searching for information, I would say it's more basic than that. So acquiring users also is a way to you to search and find users, right?
Mm.
You also you need to find a buyer. The way to the way the cost of you finding a buyer is still high or limited in a sense of like there is a middle layers that prohibits you to have the right level of informations. That's where you think that's where you have to that's where there is a potential to make it as a platform business.
The next
But
question.
I would say
Yeah.
nowadays, on the top of my mind, honestly, I don't think anything is ready to platformize. Um, some sectors maybe like I'm thinking about like healthcare and all that, but it's highly regulated. Or energy. Like I think there's a lot of talk about like making it as as a sort of a a peer-to-peer business or marketplace on like selling energy to your neighbors, for example. But those are highly regulated industry where it's also hard to kind of penetrate. But if you can find out ways to penetrate or work around the regulations, I would say go for it.
The platform business in 2024, it's a bit different. You need to go a lot deeper, right? So
Right.
let's say even let's say if you open an investment platform, need to be kind of niche down. It's like a startup investment platform or real estate investment platform, like or a stock investment platform, and then from there you need to make it stand out to a certain kind of audience, at least the early adopters, right? So the whole one size fits all, yeah, it's bloody.
Yeah, I would say though, one thing to consider is the
Mm,
scale, right? So like
mm,
when you make it too specific on the niche that you're targeting, the scale of that opportunity is getting smaller, right? So you have to think about like the trade-offs between the two, right? Yes, I think when you find like your specific niche that is still untapped, it's good, but like you also think about the scale, right? Like if you're too specific, the scale gets too small. So the finding that balance is also a key.
mm. I totally agree with you. And yeah, because you really need to work on building that community and keep scaling and scaling and scaling them. Actually, one of the my friend, he has like sport streaming platform, and I think that is gonna be huge because everyone
Nice.
I love sport, right? So the
Yeah.
business model is quite, it's simple, but it's scalable, right? So let's say the platform is acquire sport license, it's official sport license, and then generate revenue from advertising, and then you take like let's say a percentage of that revenue and do a Web3 platform and pay the rewards to the user. So let's say instead
Mm.
of you pay to watch sport, now you get paid to watch sport.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like decentralized licensed content. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say to add on that, I think in the platform business there will always be a side or like a party where you actually put money to, let's say, acquire or retain your users, but also there's another side where you actually earn money out of it, right? So to keep two balance is also key, because like you cannot put like discount to all of the sites that you want to them to use your platform. Like you have to choose sites, you have to choose where you actually invest your money and put like burn your money there, but you also need to choose sites where this site will be your money earning sites.
Mm. You know, you are one of my favorite expansion person to work with.
Yeah, you're the same. Yeah.
You know,
Why you
we
so that?
we okay. So the first thing is we accomplished like so much in a short period of time together, like 6 months, 40% of the market. It's impressive from an insider perspective, and the experience was
Mhm.
very professional and smooth compared to the usual like market HQ relationships.
Mm.
So I feel like you played a key role in transferring the product and process
Mm.
and the business model knowledge to the local team. So how did you do this and keep things like
Yeah.
peaceful and efficient between the markets, you know?
Wow, there's a lot of it's a simple question, but there's a lot of layers in the answer. But I would say it's a combinations of how to handle working under sort of cross or multicultural environment. There's that one element. The other element is how to be effective in order to do a knowledge transfer, right? So I'll tackle the second one first, because that's kind of easy. The second one is it's easy, right? So you it's I'm quite I have an experience already on doing it when I was in consulting. So I did a lot of those sort of uh, communications, or presenting new business model or new sort of tools to my clients. So I leveraged that knowledge a lot when we did the expansion. Um, and then I also developed my team to do that, because I experienced firsthand the benefit of that, and I need to make sure that my team also understand the benefit of a clear communications uh, in order to do a successful sort of knowledge transfer. The other part is the multicultural sort of communications. I think that, I mean, especially in the international expansion, the two countries, definitely there will be two ways of doing things, two different ways of communicating things. So I think it's also another way. It's also another part that I need to do a more conscious decision on how to nurture a good relationship in a multicultural environment as well, right?
Yeah, so just to sum up from let's say strategic perspective when building out an expansion team from HQ side, definitely a kind of I actually like someone with both startup and consulting backgrounds to lead an expansions,
Hmm.
because they kind of have the mix of okay the product knowledge, but also the breaking problems now when you encounter them, whatever the problem is, because in consulting or in business at high level, it's not about whether you encounter the problems or not, but about like how do you really like solve the problems, right? And the
Hmm.
next thing is being in consulting means that you have to be very good at listening to people and very good to gauge the context of things like really fast.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that would be a good additional to my remarks earlier. Yeah. So I think the problem solving sort of mindset really help, really breaking down, like at least understanding what are the problem or the root cause of the problem is kind of a almost halfway down, right? So the ability to understand what the problem is key, in order to make a successful anything really, but also especially in the expansion. And yeah, I think the active listening, it also plays a lot of roles in managing and nurturing the relationship between two parties, especially if it's a diverse environment such as what we had in our international expansion. I think yeah, and just understand that actually those sort of different perspective actually enrich the entire decision is key, right? So it's not like one, like my decision or like my thing is better than yours. It's like how we can actually combine the two together to make it a better decision.
Yeah, so that's from the HQ side, but from the market on the local market side, really need to find like let's say local market leaders that understand the market like inside out and how to get into the nuances of the market and penetrate it really fast, and then that two sides can plug together and actually
Yeah.
taking something to the market like in a short period of time, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think um getting the right partners who understand, like also understand each other's like roles and responsibility, right? So like I think the reason why our relationship worked quite well as well is because we both understand what's your role and what's my role in this dynamic, right? And as you rightly mentioned, I think the local team really needs to own the market and really needs to own the execution in the market, which means that you need to understand the market and all that. But also, I think it also comes down into the open-mindedness as well, right? Like I think uh, our organization in the expansion works best because we also have that sort of open mind on like listening to each other, as what you said earlier about active listening. We need to also listen to each other feedback, and also push if there's any, right? So, and then understand that relationship and how we actually kind of leverage each other advantage will work best in this kind of environment.
Yeah, I think it's very important to find people that take full responsibilities for their role and what needs to be done, and not not even think about the differences or the politics or whatever the case. So this is our mission. This is what we need to get done, and these are the problems we encounter. So, okay, let's sit down together, like and let's just brainstorm and get it done. That's the dynamic, not. I mean, there is a degree of diplomacy, of openness, but we don't really like focus on our differences, right? We focus on the mission.
Exactly.
So, reflecting on your experience in Gojek expansion, what would you do differently in future projects?
That's an interesting take. I think at least the two things, right? One, I think we were in Gojek at that time, we were confident, and actually that's a good thing, right? But perhaps in one way we cannot be too overconfident, so we have to kind of back our confidence with data, or like with the result of research, right? So I think if I were to go back, I think I would at least spend a little bit more time to really sort of nail down the understanding about the market, With Vietnam, I think we spent quite a good amount of time in Vietnam. We didn't spend a lot of time in Thailand. We're I would say, in my opinion, I was quite too overconfident. So
You are
that
too
makes
overconfident that you
that,
guys have built a great product and you already
and
trump
then I
like a
can just,
massive market in
yeah,
Indonesia, and the product is very sophisticated, so you can just like copy and paste it to other countries, right?
yeah. Not just the product, but also the business model too, right?
Mm.
So that, I think if I were to go back and do it differently, I would even stay every market that I work on the expansion, I would spend equal amount of time, if not more time, to understand each of the market better. I think that's one. The other one, I mean, I think it's also about the vision clarity from our top leadership. At that time, I think I understand it's because it's the first foray of into the international market, but even so, I think if we have a very clear vision on like what is the strategic vision between the international expansion, uh, I would say it will be much better in terms of how we can plan things strategically in the long term. I think um, right now, Singapore, like the region Southeast Asia is pretty similar to one and each other. But what if we are thinking of like expanding into a bigger market, let's say Middle East or East Asia? I think the vision of the leadership team needs to be there first on like what is our, not just the plan, but like what do we want to achieve in this expansion? Uh what are the key priorities, then we can do a better long-term plan on the expansion.
It's like I call it the North Star objective and key results, right? Let's say expand to the Middle East, but then you really need to quantify okay, let's say 5 years from now, what are the three measurements of how we're going to measure the success in
Yeah,
we are in how many countries, what are the criteria of these countries, and yeah, what is the end game here, right?
exactly. Exactly, the end game is something that we need to define. I think with once you go big, right? Once you are a full-blown enterprise, not a startup anymore, already a scale up, you need to think about that long term. What is the end game? You don't want to just add more countries for the sake of adding more countries. You have to think about like whether these countries that I'm adding make sense to my overall vision or strategy.
Yeah, because so expensive to pull back from international expansion.
Yes, exactly. And no, yeah, and it happens uh, even actually a lot more nowadays. Like there's one platform based out of Africa who just actually also just pulled back because like they thought they can expand, but they don't. I think it's called uh yeah, I don't remember. It's a
Is it
Jumaya or something.
Jumia? Yeah.
Yeah, Jumia. Yeah. So they just pulled back from like a few markets, not like 2 years out of their expansion plan. So yeah, those we need to learn, and I think the nowadays I think leaders of platform business needs to understand first on like what does expansion mean. It's not just adding numbers anymore. It's much more than that.
Yeah, you need to add a strategic angle to that, because let's say in Gojek case, like this is a company that, again, I need to reiterate that it's one of the biggest tech companies in Asia. So even with all the expensive pullback, they can afford that. But this is not something like a company at Series A or Series B, or like 99% of the case, I can afford this kind of mistake. So it's always the case of make a list of, like, let's say 50 countries, and then really study them, and then actually just shortlist and go there and talk to 50 people and see, okay, that this thing actually,
Yeah.
is it gonna work, or how it's gonna work. And
Yeah.
I honestly woke up the first round of expansion to maximum like 3 countries, probably just 2.
I mean, 2 or 3 per year is already a lot. I feel like. But yeah, I think, and also it's also about the product too. I think with platform businesses, what I realized is that a lot of like some countries, maybe you don't do a lot of localization or deep localization, but like when you really expand to other market, you have to do a deeper localization. You need to think about like whether or not you have the scale to do that. You have the capacity or capability to do that first. Then you think about the expansion.
So let's say if you are hypothetically a Series A founder today, and you just raised $10 million, and you have trumped, let's say, 2 markets, and now you're looking into international expansion, what are the first 3 things that you're gonna do?
I would say product market fit analysis is the key, right? So like even
For the expansion market, so it's a
yes,
localization things, yeah.
yeah. So first is like my existing products, I like whether or not it's fit into the market first. Then obviously if not, then we need to localize, right? Then that's where things get like, oh, the analyzing the effort to do that. I would say also I think we need to be more strategic nowadays, because like I don't think there will always be competitors somewhere in your target market. So really analyzing what the competitors are doing and how they survive, or how they strive. I think learning from that experience also is key to understand about whether or not we can be successful. But also in the end, right? You I mean, you can try, right, in a smaller scale, and then see if that works. So a trial and error components has to be there as well.
So that's the first one. That's the first thing, right? Testing product market fit on a smaller scale. So we have 2 more to go.
Oh, okay.
$10 million budget, not 500 million, yeah?
Then I would say do a partnership, like with the local partners. If you don't have a lot of money, that's the way to go, right? Find someone who has the appetite in the same industry, and then you basically share the pie with this person. I think that's a smart thing to do when you don't have a lot of money. Another thing, you should raise more money.
It is very someone.
um,
But this
yeah,
is like a
because
chicken and egg problem, right? I expand to have reason to raise more money, but then I spend all the money in order to raise more money.
yes, but that's how the world works, right? So
Yeah, that's how
like I think
startup works.
exactly. So like once you have the proof of point, like from your small scale trial that the market works, then there's no reason why people don't invest into it, right? So it just need a little bit of convincing and networking, but other than that, theoretically, you should be able to raise more money.
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
So from my side, if I were in these situations, three things I would do at first. I would look at my existing markets first and clean them up first, and to really come up with like my definition of how a good market looks like for my business model.
Mm.
The second thing is I will pick 5 markets that fits the criteria, and I'll go there and I'll speak to like the top 50 people, not only the business leaders, but also the people in the industry and the ecosystem that I want to expand to really map the local insights with the theory, right? Then I'll come up with like, okay, probably like out of 5, this is 3 that I should get into. So that's the second step. And the third step is I will find a really good local team.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's a different perspective that you share, and I think that's a good perspective as well. Yeah, I mean, it depends on like why you want. I mean, it depends on like whether you think about the 10 million is your limit or like the 10 million is your starting point.
I'm talking from a point of view of this is both the current limit and the current starting point, because I also want to demonstrate to investors that I'm as responsible for this much of money and from a capability point of view, and this is gonna be like how this company is gonna function, like on whichever scale, right? Because the thinking behind it, again, we go back to the word today, it's being strategic and localized when we need to.
Yeah.
That's how you scale sustainably and profitably and exponentially and keep going and don't have to like do a lot of like painful what we call pullback.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the money, it's also about the emotional side of it. It's very tough, right?
It is. It is. Yeah. All the good stuff.
Good discussions, Aun, and I appreciate you and thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge and experience on the podcast today with the experience. And we hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you for having me, and it's been my pleasure as well. We hope to connect more in the future as well.